The solar orbiter gets really close to the sun, the Emirates Mars mission blasts off from Japan, and we take stock of Australia's astronomical capabilities and contributions. It's Saturday, July 25, 2020. I'm Matt Miller, you're on Trekzone. This is Talkin Science Uncut, produced live.
With the latest science and space news 5 days a week across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube. This is Talkin Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
And it's a very happy Talkin Science Uncut Saturday to Dr. Brad Tucker.
A lot warmer than Cold Tuesday, which is kind of the MO around Canberra right now.
And another week of Talkin Science done and dusted. We're wrapping it all up today in the Uncut Live edition.
Talking Science Headlines.
And Brad, into the headlines of the week. And first up, the Southern Hemisphere has something to look at. The North has got that comet that everyone's talking about, but we've got a nova now.
That's right. It's what we call a naked-eye nova, so they don't happen that often. And so it's about what we call fifth magnitude. So it is on the fainter end, but in a dark spot you can see it. It was discovered by Rob McNaught of the famous Comet McNaught era, who has worked at Siding Spring Observatory. And so it's been an interesting object. We've been finding it. It's what we call a classical helium nova, but definitely bright and visible in the constellation Reticulum if you're keen for a gander.
Turning our attention back to the red planet, which is a little closer to us. It's in opposition at the moment, as we talked about last week. There's 3 missions heading that way. One's already launched that we're going to talk about in the stories of the week, but China and NASA are set for liftoff later this month.
They've kind of firmed up their dates. China is now looking at a late 23, and the US is still aiming for a 30 July liftoff, so essentially a week later. So definitely another kind of back-to-back weeks of Mars launching. So hopefully they keep their launch windows and it's all according to plan.
Talking Science Stories of the Week.
Alrighty, into the stories of the week, and turning our attention to our nearest star, the Sun. We have some new images. This is the second time this year we've been talking about getting really close to the Sun. We've gotten even closer this time with the Solar Orbiter.
That's right. The Solar Orbiter has released, I think they say it's the closest image of the Sun. It's still taken at 54 million kilometers, so, it's not like there. But
size is relative.
Yeah, it is relative. That's right. We're 150 million kilometers about from the Sun, so it's 100 million kilometers closer than the Earth. So, that's a big deal. It's much closer than Mercury. And so it definitely reveals some nice, intricate detail that we never thought. And I think the video and the photos here are quite remarkable.
They absolutely are, and they're showing what astronomers are calling campfires. They're like campfires on the surface of the Sun.
One of the big questions is, how do solar flares originate? Where do they start? Can we predict them? What we're seeing here is kind of the flickering of the fire of the lights on the Sun, and we think that maybe turns into the big flames or the big flares that we see later, but we're seeing very small scale flickering that we really never thought we would see any time. I think some people obviously did with the technology caught up, but it's still amazing to see this, that there's it almost looks like they're mistakes or glares or instrument problems, but really they're just the little flickers of the Sun that we would never normally see. And it's thought that these eventually turn into the big flares. So it's already proving to be a remarkable image.
As a cameraman, I'm trying to imagine how much neutral density filter is involved in these cameras to be able to see this detail. Otherwise, it'd just be a giant white image.
That's right. I mean, looking at very specific colors of wavelengths or colors of light, we could see just the main emission of hydrogen and other features we want to see, so blocking out almost all of the light. So it's a technological marvel to see it, but then you also have to have the resolution, withstand the heat. You're also on a moving spacecraft, so all these things add up. It's already proven to be a remarkable feat of the Solar Orbiter, which has only been launched about 6 months ago when we talked about it. So it's definitely a fairly new thing in some of the first batch of data that we've seen from the Solar Orbiter.
And the Solar Orbiter is going to be getting closer, I believe, to the Sun, and it's going to be taking some even more spectacular imagery.
That's right. This is just the beginning. And then there's also the Solar Parker Probe, which is doing a complementary but different experiment, getting, again, close to the Sun. So we're getting up close and personal with our favorite star. I'm saying it's our favorite because it's the most important one, obviously. It is exciting to think about what detail we're going to see more from these projects and what we're going to garner more from studying the sun in great detail, and how we're going to use that information for practical terms down the road with solar weather forecasting in terms of on Earth and in space.
Alrighty, Brad, our next story of the week, the Hope Mars mission, or the Emirates Mars mission, has successfully launched on Monday.
We were highlighting this last week. We had a couple of weather delays. First it was supposed to be last Monday, and then it was supposed to be Friday, but they had a fully successful launch Monday morning, Australian Eastern time. And it's all so far gone according to plan, which is what you like in your expensive Mars missions. It's nice that we finally saw liftoff for Hope, as it's called.
It's a $200 million mission. It's going to arrive in the red planet's orbit around early 2021, so early next year. And it's going to be studying it from above for at least a Martian year.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting because it's very complementary to the mission MAVEN. MAVEN's a more recent NASA mission in orbit around Mars, measuring its atmosphere. And in fact, people on MAVEN have worked on Hope to use and provide similar instruments, but so the data will be complementary, but they're staying around the Martian equator. So what they're going to be able to see is data in both hemispheres. They're be able to essentially, I think, produce a picture of the entire planet per day. So what we're going to be able to do is then get a global picture complementing with some of the other more specific areas that other missions have been looked at, and put a fuller picture together. So, when we talk about all these missions, they are working together, putting a full rich data set. So it's a really important thing that they've launched this mission to expand our knowledge of the Martian atmosphere.
And it is critical. I think we talked about this last week in the planetary opposition story, but it is critical to get this mission and China's and NASA's off the ground ASAP while Mars is in opposition.
That's right. You're trying to make the trip as short as possible. As you said, you're still not even getting there till the second week of February at this rate, maybe first week of February for this, maybe. So it's a long trip, and you don't want to make it longer, because the longer you make it, the more you're in space, the more problems can happen, the more radiation you experience, all sorts of things. The complications just go through the roof. So hitting it right, getting it in the window is critical. So that means you have to be ready. Your instrument has to be ready. It has to be tested. Obviously with rocket delays and getting the rocket ready, all those things have to tick the mark. And you only have 3 to 4 weeks of the window. It's not like you could say, all right, well, I'll just wait till September, October. It really moves fast in terms of the planetary motion. So if you miss a fairly small window, you're waiting till September 2022.
There's a global Mars scientific community that's agreed on the objectives for the Hope Mars mission. So it's not just the UAE going out and wanting to learn about the red planet. It's this collaborative effort to get to know the red planet as we get set to send humans.
Yeah, and this is really how space is moving. Countries may build or operate a few of them, but they involve multiple nations participating and sharing that data, and that's what it's about. No one country or group can do everything, and so they're finding ways of, by more people in the race, so to speak, and more people in the quest for Mars or be it the moon, making sure people plan the instruments and the complementary. And that's why I think it's quite cool, by using similar instruments to the last round of probes, but then looking in a different way, they can directly compare and increase the data. So they know the instrument's proven, so they don't have to think about that, but then they can find and study Mars in a really new way. So it's really exciting to see how it's all playing out. And
the one thing we forgot to mention is that it's lifted off with a Japanese rocket at a Japanese launch site.
That's right. Look, space is a very global phenomenon, and these sort of missions are just showing that multiple countries participating in the build of the mission, operating, doing the science, and launching it.
You can get social with Trekzone. Australia's unofficial home of Star Trek is everywhere you are. Just search for Trekzone.
Alrighty, Brad, our last story of the week, and it is more interesting than it sounds, I promise, but the midterm review of Australia's astronomy plan has been released.
That's right, and this is actually an important thing, and this is something that astronomers in the US and Australia have been doing for decades, and that is that instead of everyone trying to go to the government or various funding agencies to get your own pet project done, the community comes together, does a review, and says, all right, what are the top priorities across as many things involving as many people, and kind of settle on a list. And then that happens every decade, and obviously there's 5 years through it. You review that plan to say, are we on track? Has a new complete science come in the past 5 years that we should shift focus on? Have other things come into play? And then kind of give an update. And this is quite one of the reasons why space and astronomy comes together quite well. As we say, we know our projects are big, but we're going to agree on only a few that's going to benefit as many people as possible, instead of us competing against each other, working together, even if it's not our direct science, to overall progress astronomy in space.
And this is very cool because it's looking at the achievements that we've made in the last 5 years. And as you say, sort of re-evaluating and realigning if required. But the ASCAP array, the Murchison Wide Field Array, the Square Kilometre Array, they've all contributed to global astronomical studies. We've found missing matter, we've found fast radio bursts, we're also looking at gravitational waves. There's so much going on in the field of astronomy. And as I was talking to you off air, we've been focusing on in the industrial side of the Aussie space industry this month here on a Trekzone Conversation. But there is still that astronomical side of it, the scientific side of it, that is going on and making huge leaps and bounds.
Well, it's big, and it's bigger than the industrial side, right? And it's fueling that industry side, and it's because we're doing the fundamental research needed to get into these things. And as you said, there are just science things that are happening now that weren't really on the radar 5 years ago. 5 years ago when the report was written, we had just found gravitational waves. They just become a thing. We haven't discovered the first neutron stars colliding. There's been all sorts of things. Some space telescopes were working, some hadn't even been launched, planetary missions, all of it. And so it's coming together to show, all right, we've done a lot. That's great. It's kind of also a check-in. Are we actually using the money that we're getting well? Can we do it better? And the science progresses, and it progresses fast, as we've talked about. So you want to make sure you're staying up to date and benefiting as much people as possible in the community, and beyond just the science, to make sure our facilities are up to scratch and the people are up to scratch. Are we disadvantaging one community and we're not working with them? The lack of diversity and STEM in our fields, which is a big issue. All these little things add up that we need to address. And so it's a check-in on those issues. And
another achievement in the last 5 years is Australia entering into a strategic partnership with the European Southern Observatory, which is a 16-nation intergovernmental research organisation, all about ground-based astronomy.
That's right, and this is a big benefit. Instead of just operating our own telescope in Australia, joining with a bigger partner in the Southern Hemisphere. And by doing that, we can get more science, we have more facilities, and also more people using our facilities as well. And so it all comes together, and it all works and relates quite nicely. And it's all about maximizing the science. And, that agreement started in July 2017. I remember it because it was announced at the conference I organized, and it's paid dividends already, and how do we continue those partnerships? So there's lots of these different things that are on the radar. Lots of different science happening, and you just want to make sure that we're getting best bang for our buck.
Brad, as an astrophysicist here in Australia, and having this review come out, is that sort of your experience here with how things are going with worldwide cooperation? Is there anything that you hope we do in the next 5 years?
I think there's some things related to what facilities we should build, the science that we should get in, education, outreach, and also linking with things like the space agency. The space agency didn't exist when the report started. It now exists. There's overlap between those communities. So it's making sure that the communities of fundamental research and also industry overlap, but also coordinate together. And I think that's one of the big touches that needs to happen. Instead of trying to fight each other in different communities, make sure we even reach wider than just astrophysics and space and technology and industry. We do a bit more together because we can combine efforts and make really big impact. And we see when we do that well, and it does amazing things.
Thanks, Brad, for another week of looking at the science and space news. Let's do it all again from episode 419.
Sounds good.